I'm not right because I'm right. I'm right because I'm.
We're here with the Honorable Jacob Reynolds, and that's not just a title of dignity that I give him because he's my friend, but he's actually a judge here in Las Vegas. He's a rock star. We've litigated in the trench for quite some time together. Big multi-$100 million case that took a long time.
They said it was 400 million.
They did.
We told them it was not.
Yeah.
Successfully, I might
Right,
add.
right. We can't talk about what happened with that case, but we can say it was fun. One of my favorite things about Jacob is that he is very by the book and very calm in his presence. And before we started, we were just talking about how hard it is to deal with lawyers who are contentious.
Since I became a lawyer, I wanted to become a judge. My first summer, I clerked for Judge George, for whom the federal court's named. And it was just kind of like a master class. He had so many people just coming to visit him that I saw in chambers. Like I got to meet Clifford Wallace, former chief judge of the Ninth Circuit. I got to meet all the other judges in the federal courthouse, all these things. After law school, I applied and got a federal court clerkship with the chief judge and really enjoyed that work. And then when I became an attorney, I felt like I was trained by the best of the best. And when I became an attorney, I felt like we could raise the bar of some of the things that were happening with judges. I feel like one of the most important things for a judge to have is integrity. And when I say that, it's not, I don't think we have judges who are lying, cheating, stealing, anything like that, but integrity to make a hard decision. Our system of electing judges creates an atmosphere where judges sometimes are afraid of making difficult decisions because they feel that there will be repercussions on people who are not willing to donate to their campaign anymore. Whereas federal judges, where I was trained, have none of that fear. People appreciate a judge who's willing to make a difficult decision, even if it's against them, as long as they feel they were listened to and their argument was understood and that the reason you disagreed with them is well explained, then they can deal with it. A mature attorney can handle that response. An immature attorney can't handle that response. They want all the decisions to go their way. They always think they're right. I think the law demands of judges that they're willing to make hard decisions. And so that's what when I say integrity, that's what I mean. It's like the willingness and the steadfastness to follow through that decision.
As an attorney, when you were litigating, there's almost like this force field between the public arena and judges, right? I feel like it creates this inability really to have a clear understanding of personality or of motive or of how someone will view things, which sometimes can make things really hard unless you spend time getting to know
Right.
the judge, right?
I agree with that. As to what you were saying, that getting around that force field, that certainly exists, and there's there's good ethical reasons why that exists.
Sure.
You don't want somebody having a personal influence over a judge for when they're making those decisions. But what I try to do to pierce that appropriately is after a verdict, if the parties settle, I volunteer to take the parties to lunch and I pay for it, and we sit down, we talk about the case. We talk about, and this happens also if they settle it before trial, if it's a lot of a contentious hearing, summary judgments, motions in limine coming up to trial, and then they settle it. And what we do is I give them feedback from my point of view on how they did and what they could have done better.
Yeah.
And they give me feedback. Not everybody's taken me up on that. I really have appreciated those who do.
I don't know why you wouldn't. I mean, feedback's gold. It's like the most valuable thing you can get.
Yeah,
Right.
Some people want it, some people don't. You know, as a judge, people they stand up when you walk in the room, they laugh at all your jokes, all these things. So you get a lot of people who are willing to just say whatever they think you want to hear. So it is difficult to find people who are willing to give you honest feedback and have difficult conversations with you as a judge, because you do hold a lot of power. So all I can do is invite that conversation, and people have to get comfortable with feeling that they can give me that feedback. I've found that some people are willing to do that, but there are those who don't. Yes, I do. I mean, so I'm campaigning right now. I've got a lot of broad support from both sides of the bar.
Sure.
I've got support from people who I've struck their answer and entered default. They're still supporting me, even though there was that decision, but we probably deserved it. And that's on the defense side. And on the plaintiff side, I have people where I've struck their big name attorneys who everybody would know. I've struck their claim for punitive damages. And they're like, no, you're right on that decision.
See that?
I find people who are honest with themselves, even if they strongly disagree with me, I try to set up the opinion so that they can appeal me if they want. And I try to
Really?
give them my best to, right. Well, I'm not right because I'm right. I'm right because I'm final. Everybody needs a decision.
Right.
And so I provide that decision. And if they think I'm wrong, they still have the Supreme Court to go to. They got the appeals court, Supreme Court. But I tried to be as clear with them as to what my reasoning was so that they can provide their response in the record, and then they can appeal me. And if I'm wrong, I can be told I'm wrong. Haven't been wrong often, but it's been helpful to see. For me, I've really appreciated the people who have supported me in my campaign, and that's kind of how I measure. I believe it's working. People that I respect have decided, yeah, this is the way we want cases to handle, because it goes both ways. Like, I make hard decisions against both sides, and I prefer a judge who's willing to make a hard decision.
Sure. Well, and this concept of judge, I mean, I don't think we appreciate it in our modern day society, how new this idea is, relatively new. I mean, you have judges in the Old Testament.
Relatively new, I was going to say.
Yeah, relatively new.
Old.
Yeah, I mean, the idea of it, sure, I mean, there's biblical reference to this, but
Sure.
most of the world didn't really use judges. I mean, it's kind of a
Okay.
Judeo-Christian idea, right? And has come along.
You're educating me.
Well,
I've always thought of it in the Judeo-Christian model of it being thousands of years old.
and it is, but the vast majority of the world it hasn't historically used this construct, right? Instead, if you have a dispute with someone, you just go duel it out, or you take what you want, or you
Okay.
kill somebody, or fight, or whatever, right?
Certainly, there are alternative methods
Yeah.
for solving disputes.
And this is a great method where we're able to have these rules and present stuff. Do you feel like that most of the time because obviously as a judge you're trying to reach for justice, do you feel like you're able to get to that a degree of understanding or transparency where you can see what's really going on and you can make a just decision? Do you feel like that facilitated by the process?
Yeah, so I feel this, I have a mixed response on this. I'm not sure. Some people ask justice from the judge, and I know that's the goal. And so when I'm asked that question, I feel like a judge's responsibility is to say what the law is. Now, if there's somebody who's abusing the law or using it in a way that it should not be used, some claims in some areas give me a lot of discretion to come to an equitable solution.
Sure.
But people also are entitled to rely on what the law says. And so I had a case when I was in practice where people were, I think, justifiably upset at my client for what he was doing, what the business was doing, but the law was on his side. And I could understand a lot of moral misgivings with it.
Sure.
But a lot of arguments to say, this isn't fair, this isn't fair, this isn't fair. But he's running a business, he's entitled to rely on the law. Who's responsible for coming to a just resolution on that? Is it? I believe it's incumbent upon people to certainly be just and to make good decisions in that. But as a judge, if somebody's doing something that's legal and fully legal, squarely legal, above board, on the top of the table legal, my job is to sustain that and say, yeah, that's what legal is. People can protest against it, make a moral decision against it, and that's everybody's right to do that. And that's the proper, and go to their legislator and talk about it.
And lobby for change.
Lobby for changes, absolutely, but most decisions come down to what the law says, in my opinion. I can give you examples in my life where judges, when I was in practice, where judges tried to come to a just solution, and what they did really had much more far-reaching effects than they understood, and really hurt more people than and I could give you a specific if you want it, but the issue was really.
No, give us a specific. I think it's
Okay.
cool.
Well,
Illustrate
I'll give you a specific example. We represented somebody who was involved in a multi-beneficiary loan, so like over 400 people involved in this loan, and
That's a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what happens is all these people loan just a little bit, and it gets up to several $1 million.
Like a micro loan crowdfunding kind of loan.
It's a crowdfunding loan, yeah. But so multiple people invest, and then
Oh,
the
okay.
economy tanked in 2008. And what happened was our client is worth several millions of dollars and had this property worth money, but was significantly depreciated in the crash. And he wanted to make fair deals with everybody. And the law said you needed 51% of the people, 51% of the lenders to make a decision about what happens on the loan. And there were dozens of these loans involved with commercial properties around Las Vegas. And what happened was our judge, the people who were affected by our loan were justifiably upset that they weren't making 100% on their investment that they had contracted to make. But the law said that 51% could change what the deal was and just get a deal done. And that's effectively what was happening in our case, but the judge continued to say, no, that's not fair, and to drag it out. And this judge continued this process and made it very difficult on my client to get to a resolution, lots of costs, and then it went to bankruptcy, it came back. It just increased the complication of the whole issue immensely. So what happened, instead of the resolution sticking with the law, which said, no, 51% say we want to take 20 cents on the dollar. Those aren't the real numbers, but I'm just going to say,
Yeah.
the 51% say that, and 49% are against it. The law said 51% get to change the deal.
Sure. Which is fair.
And so she changed it, and I think she ended up at like over 50 cents on the dollar. And the clients paid it or whatever. I don't remember exactly what happened, but she forced her idea of what would be fair into that situation instead of just following what the law said. Why I say that wasn't a just solution was because there were dozens of other people in this situation that just told their lenders, we're not going to get involved. We're not going to pay you a dime. We're not going to pay you anything.
Because the law is questionable.
The judges aren't enforcing the law.
Yeah.
So we're not even going to volunteer to pay you a dime.
Yeah.
And these lenders, 400 lenders, had no way to get together
Wow.
to make a case. And so
It compromised the integrity of the law.
Right. And so now you had thousands of people that got zero so that the couple hundred in our case could get 30 more cents on the dollar. Wow. And so I saw people really, and the judge and those litigants, they were doing what was best for them. The judge thought she was doing what was best and she was making a good decision that made it fair for this group of people. And it did make it more fair for that group of people. And that was the decision she made. But I saw the ramification to dozens of other loans where thousands of other investors got zero because of it. Wow. And so that was kind of the ramification. So for me,
yeah, how do you protect against that ripple effect?
Well, it's an unintended consequence of somebody trying to do what they think is fair instead of applying what the law says. And so once again, I come back to that example because people deserve to rely on what the law says. That's the predictability. That's when you talk about rule of law and what makes this country great, the predictability of people being bound by the law, they need to do that.
Yeah,
So,
and that's the number one influence on whether or not someone wants to do business in any area.
right.
That's why America's so respected business-wise, right? It's because we don't
Right.
just bend the rules. So that's fascinating. That's a great example. So have you seen situations in your experience where you wish you could change the law yourself, but you're just going to enforce it the way it is?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Very hard.
It's just human.
Right. No, very, very sympathetic cases where you have to rule against somebody. There's eviction cases where people are like, I'm going to be homeless. And you're like, yeah,
That's the law.
sorry about that.
Yeah.
But you can't stay in your house for free.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And but yes, you're signing the order to make someone evicted. You're on the criminal side, you put somebody in jail and like, what's fair? It's not like judges are born with this gene that kind of distills fairness from the air and all of a sudden it's right and just. That's not the way it is, but we do our best there is room to be equitable and fair, but people have a hard time understanding what that means and what ripple effects occur when you get too far in the weeds on that.
Yeah, I think that's true for policy in general. There's that famous quote that public policy is like straightening lawn chairs in the Titanic.
Okay.
And it's at some point, I think that's because unless there's a standard that's fixed, unless there's this objective, this is the law, this is the rule, things just kind of get really sloppy.
Yeah.
They kind of swing back and forth much more easily, right?
Yeah.
So your kids see you as a dad, not just as a judge.
Yeah.
And when I started in the law practice, I was told, don't go be a judge because you'll get black robe syndrome,
Okay.
which is a thing. And I'm sure you've seen.
What do you mean by black robe syndrome? So we know we're talking the same language.
Where judges think that they're superior, or the ego
Sure.
pumps up, or that they're better than everybody or whatever.
Okay.
But your kids are there to say, hey, no, Dad, you're dad, right? What is it that you do to stay, aside from your kids, what is it that you do to stay Jacob? Because I love you. You're one of my favorite people, and you're very good at being human. Like your staff loves you, and the people that I've talked to that have been in front of you, they all love you. Like, what do you do to maintain that balance of, this is the role, and I'm not going to say that I'm the role. I'm just I'm going to be me, and I'm going to perform the role. Like, how do you do that?
I think it's important. So I agree with you that can be a problem, that there's people who don't want, you call it the black robe syndrome. I agree that that's a problem. So I already identified one of those as I try to actively get feedback from people in the bar.
Going to lunch with people is fantastic.
Going to lunch.
Yeah.
And it's so that's a fine line to walk, I guess, sometimes, because you can't talk about cases you have with people currently. That's why I try to deliberately talk to them about cases I've had in the past that are resolved and get feedback about that. Having people I trust, like there's very strong voices in the bar of people who I trust and who come to me and they'll tell me, like, I've worked on the plaintiff side with people, I've worked with people on the plaintiff sides to propose new rules for the 8th Judicial District Court.
Cool.
I've worked with people in defense bar just to understand what's going on in cases. I've set up conferences, and I'm talking about small conferences of 10 people where I'm talking to, half of them are plaintiffs that I respect and defense that I respect, and trying to get judges educated. Specifically, this is something I've kind of been pushing with some of the leadership in the judges, and haven't gotten traction that I wish I would have. But I think it's important for judges to be educated by members of the bar. I think one relevant issue we have is the business court. The business community is trying to promote a new constitutional amendment that will allow for a business court that's more similar to what they have in Delaware. And this is largely to attract businesses to Nevada that want a quicker resolution to cases and want judges who are more educated on business issues.
For sure. And we support that. And,
Right.
and I've actually talked with folks over at UNLV who are drafting that and pushing
Okay.
it.
Yeah. So some people would suggest, why do we need that? We're already judges. And when I hear that, I say, we're not listening. There's clearly a concern that people are trying to address. They've gone to a lot of trouble to propose this constitutional amendment and get it through the system as much as they've had.
Yeah.
There's clearly problems to address there.
Sure.
And so we need to listen, as opposed to talking down to that problem. We need to go out and listen.
That's
to
great.
It.
Well, and there's strengths to embrace too. Like one of the things that I think is unique about Nevada is that we do have this very business-friendly tax environment, and we've been attracting a lot of businesses. There's been a ton of businesses that have relocated. I mean, Andreessen Horowitz, huge venture capital group, has relocated their headquarters to Vegas, to Nevada.
Yeah.
Just from a corporate standpoint, and that's just one example. There's dozens of others, right?
There's multi-billion-dollar companies moving here.
Which is awesome.
Yeah.
Very good. But we need to be able to have the degree of sophistication with the judges who understand business law.
Right.
And I know you've worked a lot with businesses and you've done a lot of that type of stuff. So I mean, I would feel comfortable coming to you, but I think there's some judges who are maybe criminal judges and that's all they've done their whole career.
Right. So that's the concern.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with that, right?
Yeah.
We need criminal judges.
Totally.
But the business court people feel like, well, we would like a dedicated judge. Every judge on our court has a split docket. Like, I'm doing probate and civil. Then there's other judges who are doing eviction, civil, and when I say civil, it's like personal injury, property, all these things. They have a homicide docket and a civil
Sure.
docket. And so it's just this split interest, and they want experts handling their
Sure.
stuff.
Yeah, yeah, totally. Someone who understands the nuances and
So that's just one example of what do you do to avoid it. Like, you listen, right? If you're gonna say no instead of, well, what's the concern? What's going on? What do we need to address? I mean, there's instances of us doing that. Like, the law was just changed to, if you file a lawsuit and the arbitration commissioner determines that it's less than $50,000, you go to arbitration first. And that law was changed to 100,000 now is the cap. And that comes from the judges listening to the people, going to the legislature saying, we think that this would be a better program for $100,000 and below.
and it makes sense because you don't want to be in a situation where you end up spending 300 grand fighting over 50 grand.
Right.
Because litigation is expensive.
Right.
Yeah. So
And so I don't want to give the aura or the suggestion that we're not listening, but I just think there's times we can do better at listening.
yeah. Well, so that's fascinating because to your point earlier about professionals being insecure or secure, I think true professionalism is that willingness to listen,
Oh yeah.
to understand, right?
I think yeah. So like another thing I do that I haven't seen any other. Well, another judge has taken it up. I believe Judge Tina Taleem is doing it as well now. But I do advanced rulings, and so
Oh, tell me about that.
so advanced rulings I send out. Now it's more commonly done in California. I didn't know California did it until I started doing it, and people said, "Oh, California does this as well," and it's part of their civil procedure. And so I went and after I found out they did it, I went and lifted some of their language for my orders that I do. But essentially, what it is the problem it's trying to address is several. First is when I was in practice for a hearing, I would probably prepare for that for 4 to 8 hours and have no idea what the judge is thinking. And it's not, and it's just because it's just the same amorphous. Okay, what could they possibly be
You
thinking?
have to cover everything.
Yeah, it's like every case. What is going to happen at the hearing? And then, so what I do is I issue a ruling. If I can get to all the reading before 10 and get an opinion out, I issue, this is what I'm thinking. I'm going to rule in favor of plaintiff or defendant, whichever it is. These are the bases why, or partial, grant, whatever it is. And I just line it out and say, all right, you can either accept this ruling or you can reject it. Accepting it is the same as if you had just received it directly, so you're not sacrificing anything. It's not like you're stipulating to it. You're not agreeing to it.
Sure.
You've read it and you're like, okay, I can accept that.
That's great.
What that does, I've had people come in and change my mind, and it's because it's a tentative ruling. I send it out, people come in, and it allows them to focus their argument. So instead of taking 4 to 8 hours to prepare, now you only need 1 hour to prepare. You know exactly what I'm thinking, you know where, if I'm wrong, you know why I'm wrong,
And where the issues are.
where the issues are, what I care about.
Dude, I love that.
And so it shortens your prep time, and then it makes the hearing a lot shorter. If you decide to show up, it goes from 20 to 30 minutes of argument down to 5 minutes tops. So in my court, if you show up at a 9 o'clock calendar, you'll be done by 10.
Wow.
And I've gone to other courts where, and this was my experience in practice, sometimes I'm sitting there in court for 2 hours, 3 hours, waiting just to be called because the judge is letting everybody argue because they don't know what the judge is thinking. And so if you come into my court, I try to let you know. So what does that have to do about judicial syndrome? I'm putting my credibility out there when I send out this tentative ruling because I could look like a complete idiot.
And change your mind.
Yeah, well, not because I'm changing my mind, but because I've issued a ruling that the attorneys are like, oh my gosh, this judge is like, what is wrong with this guy? He hasn't read he hasn't understood the briefs.
Because the opposite, in federal court, it's very common for the opposite to be true. You'll spend the 6 to 8 hours preparing, you'll have a hearing, and the judge will say, we're going to take this under advisement. And you've spent weeks preparing briefs, hundreds of pages of documents, and then you show up with all these arguments lined up, and then you have to wait like another month before a ruling.
Yeah, that can be rough.
It is rough.
So
I love this idea. I love that you do this.
Well, it makes it faster for everybody.
Yeah.
I've talked, the people that I talk to, even when I rule against them, they really appreciate it because when they come in, they know how to line up their argument once again for appeal. And that's what it's for. It's like, look, if I'm wrong, you know why I'm wrong beforehand, and you can come in and say exactly why I'm wrong.
Oh, I see.
Make your record as well as you want.
Yeah.
But the issue is really, and like I said, I've changed my mind like 180 degrees a couple of times. But generally, what happens in those hearings is I'm like clarifying my order or restructuring it, narrowing it, making carve outs, whatever that needs, whatever. I don't usually change 180 degrees.
Yeah.
But I have. When someone comes in and says, Judge, you've got it wrong.
Here's why.
But, and this is why. But it's that advantage of knowing exactly what I'm thinking. The person can come in and say, Judge, you've misunderstood this statute, or this case, and this case. And then I can take it under advisement, not for a month, but I take it under for a day or two, and I go read those cases or those statute and go, oh, yeah, I was wrong.
I see that. So,
but the issue is the robe syndrome. I have to put it out there that I'm an idiot possibly here. What do you think? And if they come in and say, yeah, Judge, you are an idiot, or they can come in and say, Judge, we just want clarification, or they just accept it.
Yeah,
either way.
That's remarkable. That would be very efficient. I've seen other judges before a hearing starts, they'll say, "This is the way I'm leaning," which is great. That's a middle step. But I love this idea of before you even start prepping.
So I'll do that on my other cases. If I can't get out a ruling, I always lead out with, "This is what I'm thinking."
That's great. When that focuses the purpose of the discussion, it's great.
Oh yeah.
So, because I found discussion is one of the best ways to facilitate anything. And we have a local rule that requires attorneys to meet and confer. They have to talk before they file something with the court. They have to try and solve it on their own. And what happens when attorneys show up where they
clearly haven't?
Yeah. What's your perception with attorneys where they're contentious or obstreperous, or they don't really want to be professional. They just want to duke it out? Like, what's your takeaway from those types of attorneys?
Well, my takeaway is they're not doing their job.
Okay.
Hard discussions need to be had, and it happens for me too. Like I found out I was on somebody's preemption list, and you get that news through different angles or whatever.
And for those who don't know, that means someone can say, "I don't want you as a judge."
Right. And so each side gets one of those, and there was a firm in town that had me on their preempt list, and I found out, and I was like, "Oh, that's too bad." And I went and I called them up and said, "Hey, I just want to know what's going on here." And he respected me enough to say, "Well, thank you so much for calling. I'd love to talk to you about it." And so I went and talked to him, and he just wanted to see what my viewpoints are on how I treat different issues. And after that conversation, he's like, "Judge Reynolds, you are on our preempt list. I'm going to take you off of it."
Wow.
And so attorneys don't have hard conversations. You gave this. You have to, if you can't talk through a problem as an attorney, you're not doing your job.
Yeah.
You are there to have hard conversations, not just with opposing counsel, but with your own client. And if you're not able to tell your client, look, these are the weaknesses in our case, you're not a good attorney.
No.
If you are just going to take any case that comes in the door and take that person's money and just do everything they say and not give them an honest assessment of what the merit of their case is, that's a bad thing. That's a I almost said evil. But like,
I think it's evil. You don't have to say
bad thing.
I think it's evil.
It's a bad thing because people don't know whether or not their attorney is good. But trust me, you want an attorney that is going to be honest with you about your case.
I think it's actually a problem within the industry. And one of the things one of our foundational principles here at this law firm is we have these governing principles, and one of them is that we're honest. And and we're professional, that kind of stuff. We're peacemakers. We try and mitigate that. But I feel like the system can be so easily abused. Attorneys are trusted to be professional. They're trusted to avoid conflicts of interest. But there's a lot of attorneys all over the United States and throughout the history of the world where what they'll do is they'll say, "Give me your money and I'll go argue for you." And they know they may not win. They know that maybe they're making up issues just to be able to get more money out of the client. They're overcomplicating the problem. They're making more work. And that's a real problem. What do you think would help fix that?
Oh, well, there's different levels of that problem.
Sure.
One of the problems is incompetence. And so, so it's hard to address that on a one level, right? And so,
Incompetence of who? Everybody.
attorney, everybody.
Yeah,
Like, well, you trust your, take a very great attorney who trusts their client. You got to be able to
That's
trust your
fair.
client.
That's fair.
And the client doesn't tell you everything. So
they do withhold stuff.
client's lying,
Yeah.
withholding things, or the client doesn't know. And
Sure.
so you take on this client, you're trying to help them, and you present what you understand, and then the other side does this data dump of documents. It's like, oh my gosh, you were a liar, you know?
Yeah.
So what do you do on that? So there's varying levels of this. So how do you stop it? And there's another problem of like we don't have enough attorneys who know how to go to trial. And so
that's
some attorneys have only had law school experience. Their closest experience to a real trial is their trial advocacy class or competition in law school, which is not really close at all to what happens in a real trial, unfortunately. So
And most cases settle, like 95% of cases settle.
99.
99?
I would think it's closer to 99% of cases settle. And so the issue is so there are some I find attorneys who go to trial become very good attorneys because they know what actually happens at trial.
Yeah.
And so when they're in discovery or when they're having disputes or when they're meeting with their client and they're having these hard conversations, they have a better understanding of what's going to happen at the end of this case. And they come with more gravitas, more wisdom. Probably wisdom's the best word.
Sure.
But wisdom comes from failure and doing it wrong and things like that. So it's this, how do you solve the problem? You keep on doing it wrong, do it in good faith, and learn from that. And really try to go to trial on some of your cases. Like if you can go to trial and learn, because then you can better advise your client. You can better assess a discovery problem. You can better assess so much more if you know what trial is like.
Well, it's almost like trial is like the dark side of the moon for so many attorneys, right? Like you look up and you just consistently see what you see, but you don't realize there's this other side to it.
Yeah.
And I agree with you. We've intentionally recruited some very good attorneys who love going to trial. Chris Austin, been to trial 60 times. I'd try and hire you if I could, but because you're very experienced with that. And there is that wisdom and that experience that comes from that. And it's so funny because I see so often we'll have clients. I have a situation like this right now where I have a client who's fighting over a couple $100,000, and they end up, both sides are so entrenched in their position, they end up fighting and being contentious. It's personal to a point where they spend more money
Then it's worth.
than it's worth. They eclipse the value of what they're fighting over.
All the time.
Happens all the time, and so much of that could be avoided if people were communicative, if they just sat down and talked to each other and they were reasonable and had those hard conversations, like you're saying, right?
Right. Well, so I do a lot of mediations and settlement conferences, and I've started getting like several law firms in the community call me and say, hey, would you be willing to do this case? Because I do it for free, right? You have to pay money to go to a mediator, but I do it for free as a judge, and a lot of judges do it for free as well. And that is a good practice if you need someone to kind of bully your own client.
Sure.
And say, hey, you need to listen to this.
Yeah.
Litigating principle is very expensive.
It is.
And you can be right, and it's expensive to be right. Or a lot of people can be a business decision. And so there's people who, like experienced clients, like mature clients who have been through a lot of litigation, understand this principle very quickly. It's like, okay, I could win. If I win, do I get a judgment? If I get a judgment, can I collect it? If I can collect it, how long does it take to collect it? Are we talking about a 5-year problem or a 2-year problem? Does this person declare bankruptcy after I get a judgment? So there's so many calculations in that field, and it's like, no, I want to stand up for myself here. It's like, okay, this is what it's going to cost.
Yeah.
So a good attorney gives the client that whole perspective so they understand it fully, and then they know what it's going to cost. And then when they've actually spent $400,000 to win $100,000, you've very clearly had that conversation beforehand. This is what it's going to cost to win. Yeah, that's what I want to do. Okay.
Yeah. I feel like so much of life is just us learning what really is important, what's really valuable.
Yeah.
And so I want to come back to some of the
That's why I think we need more people with more life experience in public positions.
That's generally a truth. Yeah, a general truth. But so when someone shows up contentious, an attorney, do you look at an attorney who's being contentious in a hearing or in their pleadings? Because it's easy to be a keyboard coward. It's easy to draft something up and get in your own head and be like, and they did this, and it's awful, and using agitating words or like incendiary words like
Hyperbole.
Yeah, hyperbole in your motions, like, and they're a poo poo head,
Yeah.
right? Like you'd name.
Haven't seen the word poo-poo
I
head
know.
yet,
But it's the equivalent of
I've
that.
seen some other things.
Yeah. Or people engage in what we call ad hominem attacks, where you're
Right.
just attacking the person. It's all personal.
Right.
When you see somebody showing up that way, what's your interpretation of that attorney or that situation?
Oh, it's never persuasive
Okay.
to me. I call it out. Like if there's allegations against counsel, there's some real hot button topics, and I had I don't mind throwing this out, like Marjorie Hoff and Matt Fow were the plaintiff attorneys, and Craig Anderson and Nicole, somebody else was on the defense, but it was a police brutality case. So
Sensitive topic.
Obviously, and it was 2023 timeframe, I think, and very sensitive topic. And those attorneys handled it so well, and never, to my recollection, made it personal. They did a great job of focusing the issue to the jury of what had happened and who had been hurt. And they were, I mean, both sides were very strong in their opinions and what the police had done. And it was like this, it was an issue of somebody getting hurt as the police were stopping a really bad person. And so it wasn't like this direct thing, but police brutality was involved. And it's just, I was very impressed. So this is a positive side.
Sure.
Very impressed because I've seen the other side, another case against the police where they violated this person's rights and stamped all over the Constitution. I'm like, let's tone it back a little bit, because the issue was like the police were trying to do their job, right? Like they clearly hadn't gone in like, we're going to violate this person's rights. It's like, no, they got a warrant. They identified the issue. They went in. They didn't go like storming into somebody's house.
Sure.
They went and took money out of a bank, and it's just like, so it's they were following evidence. So we had allegations in one where I had to step in and say, let's not assume the worst in people. It's not, and be very clear with them. It's not persuasive to engage in that kind of rhetoric.
But it's natural because it's the environment we have set up with judges, and we file complaints because we're the complainers, right? The plaintiffs, the plaintiff, same kind of root words, right? And then we have defendants who are defensive. I mean, this is like a recipe for not having a relationship with the other side, right? Like you can't go to your wife and file a complaint against your wife and stay married very long. Right?
Never thought of this.
Right, but I mean, you look at the pinnacle of good relationships is like, you're married or you're in a committed relationship and you're trying to care for each other and connect with each other. That's the opposite of what we have here, where this is extremely adversarial.
Right.
And so in that scenario where we're dealing with that kind of contention, and to kind of fold a religious element to it too, because we're both religious, one of the titles of the devil in the Bible is the accuser.
Oh, okay.
And which is one of the things that's going on here, right? I've done plaintiff's work, I've done defense work. I know you have too. When you're the plaintiff, you're the accuser. You're saying this is wrong. This needs to be fixed, and that has this extremely high potential for creating contention. So what do you do to, other than saying, hey guys, be nice to each other, assume better about each other? What are some things that if you could snap your fingers and change how we do it, how would you make it less contentious?
How would I make it less contentious?
Yeah.
Once again, you just need people who are more wise, who have experience. I remember coming out of law school, coming out of my clerkship, and filing a couple of motions for sanctions against people that I look back on like that was out of control. That was too much. That was filling my vinegar. I don't know, just full of vinegar. I don't know, but I feel like you brought up the Bible. I'll throw another Bible response. Is one of my favorite quotes, and I actually bring this up often on the campaign trail or at meetings where I'm asked to speak. I said it at my investiture. Was I think it's important to love your enemies.
Yeah.
And I tell law school students this. There's a great book out there. I encourage everybody to read it. It's called Love Your Enemies. And it starts out with a story of a man a black man who was doing a Black Lives Matter protest. And he was close by to a Trump rally. And the Trump rally leaders allowed this person to come up, and the leader of the Black Lives Matter protest to come up and speak to their group. And at first there were some people like, no, don't do this. And then they started listening. It's like, oh, there's actually a lot of common ground about government intervention, overreach, all these things. But the author I think it's Arthur C. Brooks.
He's great. He's great. Yeah.
But it's a fantastic book. And the issue is, in the law, we talk about being civil. And he's like, forget that. Civil is such a minimum bar.
It's a vanilla.
And it doesn't help so much as loving your enemies. So what does that mean in the context of your question? I'm not avoiding.
No, I love it. No, go.
So
yeah, this is great.
The answer to your question is, if you really want to be a good attorney, love your enemies.
Yeah.
Okay, so why? Because if you don't understand the other side, you're not going to do a good job.
Yeah.
Or at least you will do a much better job if you give the other side its full weight and measure of their pain that they've suffered, their concerns that they're defending against or prosecuting, whatever side you're on. If you truly try to understand them and see what they're about and understand the harm that was done or that they're trying to prevent, then you become much more open to, okay, how do I need to brief this? Because the judge is supposed to be open to both sides. And so how do I take away that side at least? As a good attorney, how do I protect my client fully, not against a straw man, but a full-throated believer of the other side?
Yeah.
And then just that empathy and sympathy can help, I find, bring peace. You talk about being a peacemaker to that situation. Doesn't mean you're going to agree on everything,
right? But
just having empathy for the other side and understanding what's happened. There's a lot of theological bases, religious reasons for why we should respect one another.
Yeah.
And I believe that those are true reasons.
We're all connected. We have these,
right. Well, we're all children of God.
And we're all children
primarily.
of God.
And
there's these longitudinal relationships, like we're going to see each other after this life and all that kind of stuff.
Sure.
Yeah.
But just like, what is my role? So people talk to, we used to have, this is a tangent from what you've asked, but when this country was founded and throughout history, we've had people who govern and rule by divine right. Meaning we believe, these people are superior to us because they're descended from God in a different way than we are, or they're literally God's children on earth. You see in the Greek mythology, like people who are born from half God, a God and a mom or whatever. And so,
well, and in China too, like the original Chinese religion had this idea. For 550 emperors, they were referred to as the sons of heaven.
Right.
Right. And this
well, even in the Second World War, when Japan surrendered, part of that surrender was recognizing you do not rule by divine right.
Yeah.
For the Japanese emperor, and so the issue of this is not an ancient, only ancient thing, but when our country was founded, very clearly declared all men are created equal.
Yeah.
And that's a attack directly at divine right. And, and eventually America realizes not just all men are created equal, but actually all men are created equal, and then all women,
regardless of race,
right,
regardless of gender,
religion, all those things. And so we've grown in our understanding of that. But really, the core thrust of we are all created equal. What does that mean? Like, well, that statement is really a statement that we are all children of God, not just the king.
Yeah.
The king doesn't have a special power over us,
or special blood, or special authority.
right?
Or,
So what does that mean for me as a judge? Like, people call me Your Honor, right? And I wonder, like, well, what does that mean? And for me, it's like taking this idea of divine right and saying, no, we are all children of God. We've taken that off the table. We are all equal. We are all created equal. It is an honor for me to be the one that they've selected. They don't really select me in this way, but in other cultures it would be selected. Like, we would have a problem, we'd go to this judge to figure it out.
Yeah. And you're on your honor.
Right.
We're trusting your honor. We're trusting your integrity to see what's right.
But I think it's an honor to be the one who these people who I am equal to have come to me and said, we are asking you to make this hard decision for us that we are not able to make. Like, we believe we're both right. We need you. So I take it as that way of reflecting on we are all equals because of that principle. We are children of God.
Yeah.
And then it is an honor to be selected to make those decisions when these other children, my brothers and sisters, are not able to make it for themselves.
I love that. Well, and on your point earlier about loving your enemy, I mean, talk about one of the most radical doctrines in the history of the world, right? Like, instead of it's human nature to fight people that take advantage of us or to push back against people that abuse us. And Christ shows up and he's like, no, your job is, because of this idea that we're all brothers and sisters, your job is to love people, to suffer them. And he was the most inhumanely treated, probably one of the most inhumanely treated people on the planet, right? He, son of David, had a right to be the king, speaking of divine right. And yet he submitted himself to the humility and the humiliation of that whole experience, and condescension, all that kind of stuff.
True.
But so there's this quote from, so I love this idea that you're bringing this up, and it's hard to do that. There's this quote from Ender's Game. I think we've talked about
book.
Yeah, great book. Orson Scott Card. And where Andrew Wiggins says, speaking of these aliens that are like grotesque and ugly and that are hard to understand, hard to connect with, he says, when I truly understand my enemy, understand him enough to defeat him, I also then love my enemy. And that, I think, speaks to what you're talking about. Like, if you become vulnerable enough to recognize somebody has needs and purpose and concerns as well.
Well, that's the issue. You don't need to treat people badly. We talk about civility in the law, but one of my favorite, we don't need to treat each other badly to get through hard situations. For some reason, we think it's a war mentality where it's kill you or kill me or whatever. It's like, no, let's try to get through this hard problem. I
have a book called Litigation is War on my bookshelf.
Yeah,
to remind me of that risk, right?
Well, and people adopt that. And so, like, so Clifford Wallace, a former chief judge on the Ninth Circuit, I heard him talk about this once, and he said, I look at the idea of coming to a decision with counsel as a team huddle. And when he said that, I was just like, that's a really radical way of looking at it, because we talk about the adversary system. But really, if you can develop the idea of respect for opposing counsel and respect for the court, and coming together and saying, okay, we've got this issue, be it a discovery issue, sanctions issue, trial issue. Okay, this is what's happened. How are we going to deal with this issue together? And it's like, well, judge, these are my concerns. These are my concerns. How do we balance these concerns and get to a fair a presentation of the problem or resolution of the problem, whatever it may be? there's no reason to think of opposing counsel as your enemy. I've seen, in the most contentious cases where clients are able to be extremely, attorneys are able to be extremely professional with one another and careful with each other. But I've seen cases that I think are worth nothing, where there's no like large public policy at issue. It's just people who have become personally so invested and hateful towards each other and litigating the principle, who have just lost the connection to reasonableness. I had a case where I probably can't talk about that case. It still might be.
But it's when people take things personally.
Well, take things personally and push it way too far.
Yeah.
I could give you. I won't give you the example because I'm not sure that one's resolved yet.
That's fine. That's fine.
It's like
no, but we were just talking about this last night because I teach Institute, and you're always welcome to come teach Institute if you want. It's a college level class about religion, and we try and cover a bunch of different topics. But we were talking about this idea of loving your enemy, and about this idea that if you take things personally, then that's the door you walk through. As soon as you take something personally, you say how that person's showing up says something about me, or how that person's arguing, or what position they're taking says something about me, and it changes me. That creates fear and anger, because anger is just basically a cover for fear. Anger is the secondary emotion. Fear is the primary emotion, right? Yeah. And so when I start to take those things personally, I become afraid, I become angry, then I've lost control, and I'm now being manipulated by how the other person is showing up. But it's amazing to see people, and you did this a lot when we would litigate. We would be on the phone, and I remember we were working, we did like something like 65 depositions together, and we were navigating, depositions are a big deal, right? You spend a lot of time. We were navigating with a very contentious opposing counsel, who I still think, bless her soul, I still think she
I love her. She's great.
She is great. But
great person to hire if you need a good.
Yeah. But I remember thinking, man, this is like, she's the most unreasonable. You start building up the energy in your mind. And we would have these fights, and people were contentious. And I remember you coming in and say, well, that's not the way it works. These are the rules. And you would just bring it away from the personal and sit in that calm moment and just say, this is the way we should analyze this objectively. And it was very disarming. You were very good at that. So good. I was grateful you did that.
I'm glad it worked.
Yeah, it did.
We were able to. So yeah, that was a contentious case, and we at the end of that, I remember one of the head partners at the other firm pulled me aside the first day of trial. I was like, Jacob, I just wanted to say thanks for always trying to be. You always seemed really professional and brought things back, because there are a lot of contentious emails on that. I had a good friend. I'll throw out his name because it was awesome. It's John Krieger. Do you know him?
Mm-hmm. I know the name.
Over at Dickinson and Wright.
Oh yeah.
Great attorney.
He's a good attorney.
Good friend. But we had a case where we were against each other, and we were both local counsel, and then these attorneys from New York were the ones who were using us as local counsel to litigate their case, and they had us on these emails, and they were just going after each other. Just personally attacking each other. And John, to his credit, I remember for this day, and this is one of the things that just solidified my respect for him, was he jumped in on that conversation. He said, look, I don't know how you practice in New York, but in Nevada, we don't do this. We don't attack each other. We don't, this name calling and stuff. And he just shut it down.
That's great.
And it was great. And he talked to his own, the person who had hired him. That guy could easily just fire him. He's just local counsel. Yeah. We're just local counsel. We don't have any authority in the case, per se. But I looked up to him so much after he did that. Yeah, he jumped in and told those guys to
it's very respectful.
Clean it up.
Very respectful.
And you need that, you threw out what was the movie you quoted? A book, Ender's Game.
Yeah.
I'll throw out a Harry Potter. So I'll up your Harry Potter and match it. But it's like, when Dumbledore awards points to Gryffindor because the one kid stands up to his friends. He says it's easy to stand up to your enemies. It's harder to stand up to your friends.
That's true.
So on these principles we're talking about, it's important to, does a good friend call you out And I think a good friend does. It does it gently, does it in the right way. But
Yeah, the right
that
mix of compassion and candor.
right, talking to your friends, people on your own side.
Yeah.
Do you call out people on your own side?
I love that. Well, and you're reminding me now too of a moment. I remember it was with Catherine, the attorney that we were working with
Okay.
on that big case.
Who's great? Love her.
Well, and this story is amazing because I wrote about this in my book Zion Rising because I was like this was kind of transformative for me, and I think I'd want to share it just because I think it's a cool experience, and I think I was able to view these things because we would talk about how do we elevate, how do we be more professional. But I was sitting in LA. I had been in like a number of depositions with her, and we were like on our third deposition for that week. And it's just hours and hours and hours. And I had this expert witness, incredible guy, Peter Gross. He's like considered the grandfather of data centers. It speaks Romanian. He's Romanian, left communism, as a refugee here. Love him, sweet man. And his love for just everybody, because he had come from such a difficult environment and because of his experience, he was older, was felt in that deposition room. And I remember during a break, that day I had been praying. I'm like, can we just, I don't like the spirit of contention. I don't like how it's draining and exhausting. Can you please help this day be a little bit softer?
Sure.
And during a break, Catherine had been a little contentious, and I just kept praying, and I finally started to see her a little softer in my own perception. And during this break, she leans over to Peter and she says, my witness, and she says, "Can I ask you a question?" And I was like, oh, here we go. And she says, "I just had a baby, and I'm struggling to know whether I should take time off to take care of my child or go hire a nanny or an au pair or somebody to take care of her, because I didn't think this is what it would be like to be a litigator." And in that moment, I saw her humanity and her vulnerability, and I was like, I can't hate you.
Yeah.
Like, she was vulnerable.
There you go.
And they had a good conversation.
Solid person.
Yeah. That is such an amazing moment. So how do you help people learn that? Like, how do you help attorneys? I mean, can you do that as a judge to kind of get people to see that?
Once again, when I go talk to groups and I'm asked to like give awards out or speak, and I do once in a while, or speaking in front of people, I tell them to love their enemies.
I love it.
And so I can't go into their houses and raise them and spank them when they're not doing it right, whatever it is.
Yeah. That's fair. Okay.
But it's look, we all have to be the change we want to see in the world.
That's true.
Right?
Yeah.
And you can one by one, and that's the way the great teacher did it.
Yeah,
and so
that's it.
we, you do it as you can, and you do it by your own example, hopefully. People are always watching. People are always listening. So they can say, oh, Judge Reynolds is full of it. He doesn't really believe that. Hope nobody has that perception. But,
well, we're all weak. We're trying. We make mistakes.
Sure.
Yeah.
Or people can say, yeah, he actually does believe that.
Yeah.
And, you can only teach. You can affect your sphere of influence. And so when I have the opportunity to speak, I speak on this topic.
I love it. Well, let me have a few last questions and we'll wrap up. So if you had advice for attorneys that are appearing before you, what are like the top 3 things you would tell somebody to do?
When you've won, stop talking.
Okay.
So I find it so hilarious how attorneys, and I've seen it happen. I've had 2 people talk themselves out of a win. I've been on the bench for 3 years. I've told you how I run it. And so I've had 2 people talk themselves out of a win.
Because they won't shut up.
Because they won't talk. And they start bringing up things that I haven't considered. I'm like, oh, that's a good point. I actually hadn't considered that. Counsel, what do you think of that? And all of a sudden it's like, okay, you've lost your advantage. So when you win, sit down. Be done. Don't let the other side argue anymore. Just be done. The other is, really, I would say, love your enemies. Like that is my message. Like, you understand, and what does that mean in practice? It doesn't just apply to one thing, it applies everywhere, I think. And so what does that mean in practice? Give your opposing side full measure of what their argument, what their position is. Don't give it short shrift. Don't treat it like a straw man. Don't treat it disrespectfully. Don't denigrate it. treat it honorably, respectfully, love that person, and try to understand that person. And I think it will help, you know. And the last thing, if I have three things to say, I would, one judge gave me a great piece of advice that really helped me, and it was take opposing counsel out to lunch. This helps with loving your enemy, but also it just really helps if you've sat and you've broken bread with somebody, and you've just found out where you're from, and oh, I like soccer, I don't like soccer, or I like sports, I don't like sport, whatever it is, that you build some kind of relationship outside of this adversarial relationship. It can help so much. I could give you a number of examples how it's on me, but just taking opposing counsel out to lunch, getting to know each other at the beginning of a case. There was a judge who told me to do that. It was a federal magistrate judge, Judge Johnston. And
it's great advice.
I've done it, and it has always been helpful to things come up in the case. It helps smooth them out. It helps you have some basis to talk about a hard issue.
Yeah, I love it.
So,
yeah,
those three.
That's great, especially if 99% of cases settle.
Yeah.
At some point, that person is going to be the person you're talking to about settling.
Yeah.
Yeah. Kindness greases the skids a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's wonderful. Okay, so let's end with this. We asked you beforehand if you have any mantras. So any mantras.
I've already given it.
Love your enemy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. Okay. What about what do you believe? Like, what are some of your governing beliefs? And then lastly, what in your life have you found that creates light for you?
So I've already given you my mantra that I would share is love your enemies, do good to them that curse you, pray for them who despitefully use you and persecute you. That whole list, look it up. It's great.
That is great. Look it up. Go study the Beatitudes.
Right.
Yeah.
I think families are where you will have your greatest joys and your lowest lows. So I encourage people to have a family and to enjoy everything that has to offer and enjoy it while you can.
Yeah.
Because in as much as everything we do in this life we think is important, if you have a family, you will understand. Hopefully you will understand what is truly important, and that will help educate you as to the meaninglessness of the other stuff that we do. So what brings light to me is trying to secure that joy.
Oh, I love that. And focusing on that family joy. Mm-hmm. That's power. Yeah, because everything in this life really is dust except for relationships, I think. Mm-hmm. That's beautiful. Well, man, you bring a lot of light, and so we have a gift we give people for being on this podcast, and we like to interview people that create light or radiate light, because Lex Lumina is law and light in Latin, and so this is a little lightsaber that lights up.
Oh, good.
That's our gift to you. And
go Cougars.
I know.
Love
Go
it.
Cougars. and we have red ones too. Go Unity.
Okay, love the Rebels.
Yeah, but so that's our gift to you.
Wolfpack Blue. Right.
Wolfpack Blue, yeah. And thanks for being someone who creates light and for creating such a just and integral environment in your courtroom. And we're excited for you to run and win. It'll be good.
Hopefully. That's what we're doing.
It's going to work out.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Good to see you, brother.
All right.
Thanks, man.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for taking time today to watch this episode. I love that you enjoy this content. Please like, subscribe, and share so we can spread this across the world and create more light together.